Veterinarian Dr. Bryan faced a perplexing situation when an abandoned dog cautiously entered his clinic, carrying an injured cat. The dog's act of kindness was both touching and puzzling. Dr. Bryan's expression shifted as he examined the cat and found a chip in its neck. After a thorough initial checkup, he couldn't pinpoint the exact issue, but noticed the cat had not eaten or drunk much recently. Dr. Bryan's immediate focus was to help the cat regain its energy and strength. The tiny animal's fur was very well taken care of, and the tiny cushions on its paws were in fine condition. It must have been living in a house up until pretty recently, so had it ended up on the street then? And how did it get such a good relationship with a street dog in such a short span of time? Bryan started to have more and more questions. When Dr. Bryan brought some food, the dog was hesitant at first, but quickly turned to devouring the tasty meal. While the dog was eating, the first customers with their patients started to arrive at the clinic. Dr. Bryan still had the dog and cat here needing his attention, but he could not give them priority over the paying customers. The cat and dog were placed into different cages side by side, but he realized they probably wanted to be together, so he put the cat in the other kennel. From that moment on, they did not hear another sound from the pair of animals. Dr. Bryan and his team gathered in the clinic's break room, and their conversation invariably turned back to the remarkable duo that had entered their lives that morning. "It's like they knew we could help them," one nurse remarked, observing the pair through the kennel window. As the day progressed, Dr. Bryan noted with relief the subtle improvements in Jojo's condition. The cat's leg, initially limp and unresponsive, began to show signs of strength. In the late afternoon, Dr. Bryan finally had a moment to scan Jojo for a microchip. The beep of the scanner was met with an anticipatory silence. There it was, a chip. The discovery brought a wave of excitement mixed with curiosity. "Who do you belong to, Jojo?" Dr. Bryan wondered aloud. Gathered around the phone in Dr. Bryan's office, the staff held their breath as he dialed the number linked to Jojo's microchip. The phone call, initially filled with the promise of answers, ended abruptly with a click and then silence. The sudden disconnection sent a ripple of confusion through the room. "Why would they hang up?" one staff member asked. The room was alive with speculation, but Dr. Bryan remained thoughtful. "There's more to this than a disconnected call," he murmured to himself. Dr. Bryan set out for the address linked to Jojo's microchip. The evening air was cool and quiet as he drove, his thoughts a mix of apprehension and resolve. This journey, he knew, was a necessary step in unraveling the mystery of Jojo's past. The GPS led Dr. Bryan to a neighborhood that seemed to wear a cloak of neglect. The streetlights flickered, casting long shadows on the buildings. At the end of a narrow, dimly lit street, Dr. Bryan found the house. Its windows were boarded, and the overgrown garden gave it an abandoned look. He hesitated for a moment, his heart racing with a mix of fear and curiosity. The house stood forlornly in the moonlight. Inside the house, Dr. Bryan's flashlight revealed a layer of dust covering everything in the living room. Amidst the remnants of a once-lived life, he found old photographs. They depicted happier times, a man smiling with a cat that resembled Jojo. Bryan felt a surge of emotion, realizing these pictures held stories of love and loss. The man in the pictures appeared kind, his affection for Jojo evident. Bryan wondered about the journey that led Jojo from this seemingly loving home to his clinic. Back at the clinic, Dr. Bryan scoured the internet for information about the house. He discovered old property records, and as details about Jojo's previous life began to surface, a narrative started to take shape. The photographs, property records, and the state of the house all told a story of change. Dr. Bryan realized that understanding Jojo's past was more complex than he had initially thought. Brian, bolstered by his findings, decided to call the mysterious number once again. His voice was steady but empathetic as he introduced himself and gently shared the discoveries from the abandoned house and the photographs. There was a pause on the other line. The revelations about the house and the photographs seemed to break down some barrier. After a moment of contemplative silence, the person agreed to meet Brian. It was a reluctant concession, laden with an unspoken mix of anxiety and a need for closure. The clinic buzzed with subdued excitement as Brian and his team prepared for the meeting. They speculated quietly about who the person might be and what their story could reveal about Jojo. The day of the meeting dawned clear and bright. Brian arrived at the clinic early, his mind racing with scenarios and questions. He arranged the photographs and documents neatly on his desk as the clock ticked toward the appointed hour. The clinic's usual hustle seemed to pause, everyone waiting for the revelations that the day promised to bring. As the clinic's door opened, a young man stepped in, his eyes scanning the room until they settled on Brian. "I'm here about the cat," he said. Brian could see the resemblance to the man in the photographs. The young man introduced himself, confirming he was the son of the man in the pictures and thus connected to Jojo. Sitting across from Brian, the young man began to unravel the threads of his father's life. He spoke of a man who was kind, but often distant, a solitary figure with a deep affection for Jojo. He was a good man, but he had his struggles. Jojo was the one thing we both loved without question, he reflected. His decision to separate from Jojo was fraught with emotion, a step taken during a tumultuous time. It was clear that Jojo was more than just a pet. He was a symbol of the moments of love and understanding between father and son. Throughout the conversation, he was open yet guarded, sharing enough to paint a picture, but withholding details that might reveal any illicit activities. Brian and his team listened with deep empathy as the son shared his story. As he continued, the son expressed regret over his decision to leave Jojo. It was a decision made in distress, leaving a lingering sense of remorse. "Caring for Jojo might help you reconcile with your past," Brian proposed, his tone encouraging. He saw the potential for redemption and healing not just for Jojo, but for the young man grappling with his father's legacy and his own sense of self. He gazed at Jojo, contemplating a fresh chapter with the cat and the dog, both demonstrating unwavering loyalty. Inspired by the son's reflective demeanor, Brian continued to promote pet care as a path to redemption. It presented an opportunity for the son to rewrite a part of his narrative. The son made a heartfelt choice to reintegrate Jojo into his life. "It's what my dad would have wanted," he affirmed, his voice filled with determination. As he spent more time at the clinic, the son developed a growing fondness for the faithful dog that had accompanied Jojo. Witnessing their bond and recalling his father's affection for animals, he began to consider adopting the dog. This thought expanded his newfound commitment to include this unexpected yet faithful companion who had played a pivotal role in Jojo's journey. Together, the son, Jojo, and the dog embarked on a new life, establishing a home brimming with love and mutual care. Over time, subtle hints and overheard conversations around the clinic gradually unveiled a startling truth. Jojo's original owner had been involved in illicit activities, a stark contrast to the simple, affectionate moments captured in the photographs. The tale of the son, Jojo, and the dog concluded with a message of hope and redemption. Their shared journey exemplified the healing influence of companionship and the resilience found in fresh starts.